I ask audiences all the time, how many of you would like to be a professionally managed business? Well, they all raise their hand, but I ask, how many of you could actually define what it means to be a professionally managed business? And you get a blank stare. What are the consequences? Poor communication, misunderstandings of job responsibility, misunderstandings of who's supposed to be paid when and how. I mean, you can just go down through the list, and these can result in literally paralysis of decision-making. Number one shift is a mental shift.
Yes.
What is the culture that you want for your farm? Do you want to be known as a professionally managed business?
Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine, Froese, Farm Family Coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm. Hey folks, want to welcome you to another episode of the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Elaine Froese, Farm Family Coach, and my joy and delight today is to introduce you to my good friend Dick Wittman, who lives near Clarkston, Lewiston, Idaho. He's very well renowned across North America at whitmanconsulting.com, and Dick's binder of tools I've been using for years with our farm family coaching practice. And Dick, I've called you to here today to talk about why farm families are so hesitant to ask for help in farm transition. So how are you doing today, Dick? And what's the main thing you want to get across?
Well, I'm doing great. And the main message I'd like to get across is that this should not be a scary process, and it should not be something that we would put off indefinitely. We need to feel like it is complex, but it's doable. There's a natural pathway. There's a lot of homework that you can do on your own part to take some of the mystique out of this process and know enough about your business, ask good questions, and use your advisors effectively.
So so what I think our listeners need to know is that your daughter, Corey, is a successor in the CEO, so to speak, of your very large ranching, farming, forestry business, and you're still paying a role in the forestry sector because my understanding is no one else wanted that job. So you're hanging in there in the bush, but you're also doing a lot of speaking and writing around farm management, which is your skill set. And also, I think, Dick, what I admire most about the decades of work that you've done with farm families across North America is that the tools and the approach you take is really practical and useful. And I'm curious to know this avoidance of getting started. Is it because they don't know how to start? They're overwhelmed. They don't want to pay for it. What's the key issue for farmers being resistant to getting good help and good advisement for farm transition?
Well, there's several.
Okay.
Several obstacles. I think the first is that you only get one chance to do this in your lifetime, and farmers don't hear a lot of success stories. What they hear are the failures. And so, number one, they're scared to death that they don't want to mess this up, and they don't get content. Yeah. Because they don't have a clear concept of the pathway, they tend to think this is more complicated than it really is.
I agree.
There's a hesitance to use advisors because there's been bad experiences with advisors charging lots of money and not delivering the kind of help people need to do effective succession. A lot of times people think they're getting succession help and they're getting salesmen selling them trusts and insurance and wealth products. So the act of succession planning or transition is a process that needs an advisor that's focused on that process, not on selling something. So that's the first kind of the chapter of what's the obstacles and how do we overcome those obstacles.
So the resistance and the pushback it's multifaceted, but what I want to hang on what you just said is it sounds complicated or overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be, or if you have a clear pathway. So you have helped me understand the importance of financial transparency. And I'm actually recording this podcast from downtown Des Moines, Iowa, the Iowa State Fair, apparently started today. So it's July 24th while we're recording this in my Shishi hotel room. You're in your office back at the ranch. The deal around looking for good advice or deciding that it's not complicated. The path I've been using this week with the FFA, New Century Farm Group that I'm speaking to, is income stream, housing, and fairness. Tell me what you want listeners to understand about doing their homework first from both generations, the founders and the successors. Because your daughter, Corey, I think she has an MBA. She's well educated. Maybe use your own story. And again, Dick, you also said we don't have a lot of success stories. That's because people love to see other people fail, or there's something sensational about, another farm going down. But that's not what you and I think or feel or see, because we've seen a lot of success stories. It's just they don't get the news.
Yeah, I don't believe that people like to see other farms fail. I do think that we don't hear a lot of the successes, and so consequently, the reputation of succession planning is that people hear lots of horror stories, and they don't want to be one of those.
But that's not motivating. They've heard lots of bad stories, but it's not getting them to the table.
Right. So I think part of taking the fear out of this is, I'm going to make a phrase, you can't figure out where you're going to go to till you can tell me where you are. And so to answer that question, people need to really look intentionally at where is the business today financially, and what's the 5-year trend of how it got here? How is the business managed professionally today? To what extent is there documentation on your mission, your vision, your core values? Are there job descriptions that clearly define job roles today? And I'll depart on that one. People just want to, a lot of times, say, I just want to let go and kind of be in the oversight role. And so I say, so what do you going to let go of? Can you tell me what your job description is? And they can't define it. So you can't delegate what you can't define. So a lot of times, one of the first steps in transition is taking what's on people's heads and getting it onto paper to say, this is who we are, this is how we're managed today, this is our org chart, this is our job descriptions, these are the policies of how we compensate employees and owners. And so it's here we are today, and
snapshot.
You transition, all those things are going to get re-examined. So incoming generation said, so how do you handle salary and compensation? Well, a lot of times people can't even define how they're handling it now. So how are we going to talk about how we're going to handle it in the future? Who gets a house? Who doesn't? How do we put a value on it? Who fixes it up?
Who's paying for it?
Even with the policy considerations on who gets to work here, who can be an owner. The starting point for transition is putting on paper what you're doing now as a business, and then looking at, is this an attractive employer? Is this also an attractive business that you want to put your life's investments in as an owner? But you can't answer those questions until you have a thorough analysis of the financial situation. Is the business viable financially? Is it sustainable?
How many families can this
people
work?
have the capacity to invest? What are your ground rules on being an investor? You just show up, and if you live for a year, you get to be an owner, or is there a pathway to investment? Or you've got to demonstrate financial responsibility and the ability to maybe exercise a buyout program. So there's a lot of education that needs to take place before we rush into solutions and alternatives for what we're actually going to do.
So what I want the listeners to know is how to find you. And most people leave this to the end, and I'm not going to, because Wittman is Wittman consulting.com. It's really super easy to find you, Dick, and your resource binder, which I was able to, very blessed and honored to be part of your training group back in 2016 or earlier, can't even remember. But your filing system, 6.2 is job descriptions, 9.2 is performance evaluation. Your consulting management binder costs less than a room night in a nice hotel. So under $300 US. And in Canadian, it doesn't matter, because for all the Canadians listening to this is the best investment you'll make, because what Dick has just rambled off is in a whole process and pathway that you can get digitally on your computer. You can also get the binder copy if you want to get it that way. I have both. And, Dick, just what you said about compensation, why is there resistance to asking you for help? I think there's also a bit of humiliation going on in agriculture of the founders saying, wow, by the time I was 60 or by the time I was 65, I thought I'd be debt-free. I thought I'd have more on my personal wealth side. But here we are in a market that's tight. Inputs are high. Land costs are really high. And people aren't financially where they thought they were going to be. And they're expecting the next generation, in some cases, to delay their compensation, which just puts me on the roof, because young families need a decent income as well to live. And young families also need disposable income to manage debt. So why are farm families resistant to pay for decent advisors, and how do they find really good people?
Well, I'm going to step back a little bit about not just paying advisors, but just approaching compensation as a process is. There's some farm businesses that do this beautifully and others that just butchered up. And really it stems from how have you evolved from the family business where it's everybody's paid equal because we want everybody to grow up and be equally smart and be equally paid, to the business world that says, what's the job? What are the skills that's required? What would a market-based salary look like for that job, regardless if you were family or not? And moving to a market-based approach to compensation is not easy, but in the long term, it's the only way a family's going to survive. Because paying based on entitlement or last name, where there's no bearing or relationship between what you're paid versus what you perform it as a job, it's just going to become a cancer that's going to create nothing but problems. And the thing that happens is people don't differentiate how much comes out of the business to pay for your work versus how much do you take out of the business that's a return on your investment that you're entitled to the distribution of earnings. So oftentimes we muddy that up and we tend to take out what we think we need to live on instead of saying, how much does the business owe me for what I've done? And then once that's paid, if the business has excess liquidity, we can take a dividend or a partner capital payout or something. But that's a return of our investment. That's not compensation for our work. So I think because farmers haven't paid themselves at a competitive, they also tend to, I don't think they appreciate the value of professional advisors, that 1 hour advice could save them thousands of dollars in efficiencies, or it could save them avoidance of a family breakup because of some really bad business practices.
Well,
I think advisors have not done a good job of saying why is it that we do what we do and why does it have value? And so farmers just tend to think, well, I just don't want to pay these high fees because I'm not going to get anything for them.
Well, I like to use the term, let's have a fair exchange of value, right? That I invest $400 an hour on coaching or financial management advice and get some clarity, or even family facilitation. You also in your binder have a 28-page family business profile thing for people to actually have like a workbook, or what I would call an implementation guide, to really start putting things on paper to see where the gaps are. And for the next generation, the successors who are listening to this, my question is, what is your vision as you transition into labor management and ownership? And have you written down, and are you really clear on what you want? Because most aging farmers, when I ask them what they want, they look at me, Dick, like a deer in the headlights, and they go, I just want to work when I want to work. And I want to die in this farm, in this house, and go out boots first. And that's their transition plan. And I attribute you probably as once or twice a week about a phrase that you used with an AgX conference a few years ago, where you said, it's important to know your role when you're stepping back without stepping away, because many of the farmers we work with are never going to retire, and you're not retiring, but your role has significantly shifted on your farm. And that's good, because we all are getting older. We need to pay attention to how life is not a straight line, and things need to be in writing so there are no surprises. And, you know, you talk about success stories. You talked about return on investment and knowing what your financial earnings are. I also want to start a conversation in agriculture on return on energy, and conflict around the pain of not knowing is causing families to have what I call distracted management. And Dick, you teach at TPAP. You have your own consulting business. You're asked to speak all over North America. Why are people not activating all the tools that you've had for so long?
I think there's just so many excuses.
Okay.
I think people know they need to do it, but people didn't get into farming because they like to write job descriptions, or
no, it's because they like to ride tractors.
They got into it because they like to grow stuff. So financial literacy, HR, succession planning are things that they know they should do, just like they know they should have a will, but it's stuff they have to do, not like to do. So when you have things that you like to do, it's easy to go after those. So unfortunately, a lot of times the motivation comes with an event, whether it's a heart attack or a family fight, or maybe the kids come to mom and dad and say, I can't live with uncertainty anymore. Either come and talk to us and help kind of plan, or we're going to go make a different plan somewhere else. So if you don't like to have succession plan initiated based on a health event or a threat,
right?
But unfortunately, oftentimes that's what it takes to get people's attention. So I think they're really progressive. You know, the proactive farmers are people that know this is important. It's just like going through your entire equipment line in the fall of the year and saying, what are we going to look at this winter so that when it comes to the field, they're ready to go.
Right.
Putting your management system under the microscope, looking at the strategic issues that are important to your business and saying, hey, I'm 10 years away from retirement here. I should be actively engaged in succession planning. And I don't like the idea of it. It scares the heck out of me, but now I better get going, because the longer I put this off, the less options I'll have. And once people embrace it, there's a process. As you said, the guidebook has, if nothing else, it has it's a ring binder outline of stuff you just need to go gather up and put in there so you can educate yourself.
Well, one of my favorite tools you have is your farm proficiency test. It's like a 1-2 page checklist. Yes, we have this. No, we don't. It's almost like pretend you're going on a lovely trip and you have to get packed and you have a checklist and you can see where the gaps are. Oh, I better take my passport, or I forgot to pack my iPad or whatever, right? And so my curiosity, Dick, is the families that you've seen that once they've started engaging in your system and your process, to me, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like the momentum thing is a journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first step. So for folks listening to this, after they get your binder in their hands, your guidebook, and I've been handing out pieces of your tools like crazy, especially your compensation worksheet, because people need to have a decent income to live. And again, their job description list is 7 pages. I just tell people to cherry pick and start getting clear about what it is they do want to do, what it is they don't want to do anymore. And your performance role indicator is only 1 page, but I sat down with that page with a farmer of a 22,000 acre farm, had 2 managers. One was his son, one was his son-in-law. And we went 3 hours through that sheet, and I have it memorized. What are your strengths on this farm? What are things that you could improve in? How do you need management to support you? And what is your learning plan? And that's what you wrote years and years ago. But that's what's so helpful, is you're not talking about airy-fairy stuff that isn't going to get success and a return on investment. The tools that you've put together give people a roadmap. And that's what you said they're lacking, is they don't know where to start. They're anxious, they're overwhelmed. and they don't know what the pathway is. So in just wrapping this up today, because I want to be respectful of your time and you've got other things to do in the summer on your ranch, what is the overall pathway that will light a fire under people listening to this? Like, what's the one or two things they can do today to start moving them forward with their transition plan?
I would say that number one shift is a mental shift.
Yes.
What is the culture that you want for your farm? Do you want to be known as a professionally managed business? Mm-hmm. Or do you want to be normal? Normal being laissez-faire, basically reactive in how you approach things, pretty much everything undocumented. Doesn't mean we don't have structure, but it's in people's heads, so no two people have the same understanding of a policy or a job description. So once you as a team decide to survive, we want to be known as a professionally managed business. How does that dictate what we do in our culture on how we communicate, how we put things in writing, how we approach our planning processes? Do we want uncertainty, or do we want a proactive forward planning process that's addressing these things before there is a crisis? And I ask audiences all the time, how many of you would like to be a professionally managed business? Well, they all raise their hand, but I ask how many of you could actually define what it means to be a professionally managed business? And you get a blank stare. But by the time they've gone through the proficiency test and looked at a number of best business practices and said, I don't do this, I have this, but it's in my head, it's not documented. And then ask themselves, what are the consequences of saying no to all these practices? What are the consequences of not saying, I have this in place, it's professionally done? And it's not hard for people to answer what are the consequences? Poor communication, misunderstandings of job responsibility, misunderstandings of who's supposed to be paid when and how. I mean, you can just go down through the list, and these can result in literally paralysis of decision-making. They can result in escalation of feelings. It can turn into all-out fights over business issues. So there's no end to the negative consequences of not being a professionally managed business. And that should be your platform to launch into succession planning, is that we're starting here. In the future, we're going to commit to being a professionally managed business. How would a professionally managed business transition to the next generation?
And I will say amen to that, because what you said about culture is so important. I have a presentation called Culture Beats Strategy, and I think Peter Drucker originally said the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And culture to me is what people truly believe to be true. So do you believe succession transition planning is hard? I don't. It is a process, but it doesn't have to be painful, with good facilitation. And as you said, mindset. And I think both you and I have been in agriculture for decades, and we've seen all kinds of things change and transition. But let's be positive that growth, change is optional, or change is inevitable, pardon me. Growth is optional. We all need to grow and adapt in our business as we age as founders, and as the successors take on new technology and new business plans. The second part of culture for me is how you behave. And I expect good behavior by everyone. I expect everyone to be positive, to show up as an adult, to be accountable. And then the third piece of my culture framework would be how we make decisions, Dick. And I think that's the beauty of your guidebook, is it gives you a very concrete tool to look at your spreadsheets and your checklists and your compensation worksheets, so that people don't have to do all the 40 years of work you've already done. They get to take what you've created, plug in their numbers, plug in their thoughts and ideas that's specific to them, and then away they go. So it's like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So look at this. I can go to Dairy Queen this week, downtown Des Moines, and get a peach blizzard, which I'd love to do. But am I willing to invest the money on treating myself as a reward with a peach blizzard after I've spent the $250 US at Wittman Consulting to get your guidebook? Absolutely. What would it look like if you spent the same value of one hotel night on getting a pathway for you to get kickstarting and transition. The other thing I'm curious about is the women listening to this podcast, because most of 66 or 70% of my listeners are probably women. And some of them are saying, Elaine, what can I do to help on our farm? How can I be a better rural resource? And they might have to be what you call the champions and what I call the drivers of, we're going to do this. I'm ordering the workbook. I'm going to start filling it out. And I'm just going to start riding with you in the tractor or talking to you at coffee and just getting everybody's thoughts on paper to professionalize this farm. And it's a beautiful thing, Dick. And it makes your life so much better when everybody's clear about expectations and everybody's happy about a fair exchange of value. So thank you for coming into the house today.
Thank you, Elaine. I've always
in the forest.
I've always appreciate your passion, and
Oh man,
it's been a humbling experience coaching too many people to count over my career, and it breaks my heart to see stress that's self-inflicted.
Yes,
but a lot of people, they blame everybody but the person they should blame, which is your own hesitance to take action. And I don't care what tool you use. There's plenty of tools out there to start the process. There's good pathways. You just need to commit to rolling up your shirt sleeves and investing time and energy. And if you get this preparation done well in a binder, and then you hand this to the people you want for advice, think how much more effective they're going to be in advising you than if they're trying to pull piecemeal out of your head. Who are you? Where do you live? How long have you farmed? How many kids do you have? What's your net worth? I mean, they're asking you a bazillion questions that you should be able to hand them a 3-ring binder and say, this is who we are. This is all our people. This is all the biographical data you need. This is our history. Here's our family business structure. Now you study that, and then let's sit down and talk about how to look at options going forward. You have an informed advisor that's going to give you much better return on your investment than if you just go in there and expect them to pull information out of your heads.
Well, and that's how we can save farm families, Dick, $400 an hour, because I spent 5 hours facilitating a family meeting. They went to see their lawyer, and she said, my, you people are really well prepared. How come you know all this stuff already? And they said, well, we spent 5 hours with Elaine Froese, so we're good to go. And that is a shout out, and I'm happy to say that. I'm not bragging. I'm telling you exactly what happened. And just like the team that you have, you also have a board of directors that you sit on for your own business, Dick. And I just think that's another really great thing that we can talk about in another podcast. But we'll wrap this up for today. And we'll also tell listeners that if this has touched something in you and you'll want to know the joy and get away from the pain of not knowing and better the culture on your farm for transition, please reach out to us. We'll have Dick's contact information in the show notes. And we're happy at farmfamilycoach.com to do a free 15 or 20-minute discovery call to help you get started. So I noticed there's some Band-Aids on your finger there, Dick. So please take care. Keep yourself in good health. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that your health is your true wealth. And as a farm family coach, I also want to be rich in relationships. So let's keep that as your goal as you seek to find harmony through understanding on your farm. Take care, Dick. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Well, your sport. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.